I'm going to be talking about the Asian financial crisis, Bosnia, and Jeet Kune Do, or culture, team, adaptability, the keys to enterprise success. First, I'm going to talk a little bit about my organization. I'm with CEP America. I have been the Chief Medical Officer for 17 years now. When I took this role back in 2000, we did about $130 million worth of business a year. And in the last 16 years, we've multiplied that sixfold. We do just under $900 million worth of business a year now. And actually, we're predicted to grow significantly next year. Just even looking at our business development pipeline, we should be well over $1 billion. Pretty phenomenal growth. Considering what's happening in healthcare, what's happening to physician groups, a lot of them are not staying alive. They're barely surviving. There's very thin margins. We've actually done quite well. Not only that, we've started out pretty much as an emergency physician ambulatory care group, and we've expanded significantly. So now we don't just do ambulatory care and emergency medicine. We do anesthesia, we do psychiatric emergency services, ICU, hospice, telehealth. We're looking at expanding into multiple different areas. I've had actually the great opportunity to sort of identify those types of practice lines and the initiatives that help us innovate within our business and create our value proposition. And I've been doing this for quite a while. I've had the opportunity to meet with literally hundreds of tech companies over the years. And so what I want to provide is my observations as to what are the absolute, the essential, critical, and enterprise functionalities that are necessary for us to succeed. So, Milton actually mentioned that I enjoy skiing, and so I'm going to use skiing in this presentation. About 20 years ago, I was skiing in Zermatt, and it was a blizzard. It was freezing cold. I had on a couple of jackets. I was totally wrapped up. There was nobody on the mountain. There was total whiteout, and I thought, my God, this is crazy. And this young guy zips up in front of me. He's wearing a windbreaker and a baseball cap. And on the back of the baseball cap was embroidered, "Ski tough or go home." And I thought, that's great. That is going to be not only my ski motto, that is going to be my motto for life. And so, this is a run at Squaw Valley. It's called the Needle Chute, and it's off of the Cornice Bowl. You can't tell because it's a two-dimensional, but it's actually quite steep. It's about probably a football field length almost down, and those trees at the bottom, probably 40 or 50 feet. So with a model like that, you're probably thinking, yeah, I'm going to go and straight line that puppy. Now, what I'm thinking is, whoa, that is steep. That is incredibly steep. And so when I am on the slopes, people always see me like this, and I'll be down here, and they'll think, yeah, he's stretching, getting ready to go. Actually, I am praying to the mountain gods. Keep me safe, and let me enjoy this day. So, how do you get down a mountain like that? You actually don't want a straight line. It'd be going 40 miles an hour when you hit the bottom. What you see is a bunch of vertical lines. You do something called a pedal hop turn. A pedal hop turn is very simple. One foot is, the lower foot's here, the upper foot's on the mountain. You take your upper foot, you jump fairly hard, you flip around in midair, and you face the other direction. And you do a series of pedal hop turns till you get to the bottom. Now, what's interesting about a pedal hop turn is your turns aren't linked. Each is completely independent of the next turn, but at the end, you get down to the bottom. So, what I want everyone to do is a little pedal hop turn with me. Man, what's up with zombies? Isn't it interesting how we have these fads? We've had the zombie fad for years now. There's Z Nation, Zombieland, Walking Dead, all these different zombie shows, and everyone's concerned about zombies. And so it's not surprising that the Motley Fool addresses this. I'm not sure if anyone reads the Motley Fool. It's a very well-known financial advice column. And the question was raised, what's the best place to keep your money in a zombie apocalypse? Seems like a reasonable question. You've worked hard, saved money, and even started investing. You're prepared for a financially fit future. That is, until the hordes of zombie marauders come knocking. In the zombie apocalypse, where should you stash your hard-earned money? Gold. Gold has been a store of value for as long as goods have been traded. People want gold, a finite resource which drives its value far beyond its intrinsic value. And in a zombie apocalypse, I think gold would do quite well. If society collapses, those who survive will likely turn to gold. That's an article in the Motley Fool, I think, just a couple years ago. This is interesting. This is in the Business Insider. Overstock.com is hoarding more than $10 million in gold. In case the banking system collapses, Overstock.com is prepared for the worst with a stockpile of precious metals in a secure location in Utah. The company has enough food and cash stored up to survive a disaster that would doom the average retailer, CEO Patrick Byrne told BuzzFeed News. That means hiding away $6 million in gold in an undisclosed safe space in Utah, plus a 30-day supply of food. Pedal hop turn. Does anyone here, a lot of you here probably remember the 1997 financial crisis in Asia. It was an incredible crisis. South Korea lost over 2/3 of their stock value in a period of months. Their yuan dropped by more than 50% in value, and all of Asia suffered this enormous financial crisis. They estimated it was going to take over 10 years to recover. Actually, it took them 18 months. It took them 18 months to recover. I have a short video I'd like to show all of you. Do you know what these people, these citizens are doing? What that's an example of? They are citizens from South Korea, and they are taking their family heirlooms, their gold, the money that they have, and they are donating it to the South Korean government with no chance of ever getting any of it back. They're giving it so that they can bolster the value of the yuan. I remember when this happened in 1997, I thought to myself, there's a country that is going to succeed. They are not going to fail. So, here's an article. It's actually an excerpt from a couple of articles, one from Wikipedia and one from the New York Times. Since 1997, South Korea has managed to triple its per capita GDP. Indeed, it resumed its role as the world's fastest growing economy, catapulting South Korea into the ranks of the world's wealthiest nations. South Korea's ability to endure hardship and bounce back points to another lesson: the need for a sense of shared purpose and willingness to sacrifice. South Koreans rallied to help their nation, spending less, saving more, and learning to be more competitive. Alone, we can do so little. Together, we can do so much. Pedal hop turn. And in 1993, Bosnia was an incredibly crazy place to be. Actually, I was in Bosnia in 1993 in the fall. I worked with the International Medical Corps over there. It was an interesting place. I flew from San Francisco to Split, Croatia, to Zagreb, and actually, during the fall of '93, if people remember the Bosnian War, it was at its height. The Sarajevo airport was closed on a regular basis, so I had to stay in Zagreb for about a week. The country director for the International Medical Corps comes up to me after about a week there, and he says, there's a brief window. It looks like we can fly you in. There's a UN plane leaving in 2 hours. So I packed up my bags, got on board the back of a C-130, and it was very similar to this. I don't know if you've ever seen Zero Dark 30, but at the end of the movie, Jessica Chastain gets into a C-130 and is strapped into a jump seat. So I get into the C-130 in Zagreb, I'm strapped into a jump seat. I'm the only person in the back of this plane. There is just tons of ammunition and food and antibiotics and medical supplies, and in the front are 3 military individuals, and they're sitting in the front of the plane. Anyways, I have a quote from somebody who was actually flying there at the same time, who writes much better than me. Her pen name is actually the Invisible Author, and she wrote this article, Back to Bosnia, Maybe Airlines. She's actually there in the fall of '93 also. 20 years ago today, I landed in Bosnia to start a peacekeeping tour in a place where there was no peace to keep. I arrived in Zagreb, Croatia in the early hours of 27 October 1993 and waited for my ride to Sarajevo on Maybe Airlines, the flight service that uses military aircraft from Canada, Britain, Russia, Germany, and other nations. The flight into Sarajevo was a ride like no other. The airport is located in a valley, and the glide slope sits between hills high enough to make the aircraft vulnerable to enemy fire. For this reason, the aircraft has to conduct a maneuver perfected in Vietnam, but now known as a Sarajevo approach. The aircraft would approach the airport at altitude until just before the runway, then dive at an angle not unlike a World War II dive bomber and pull up just before it reached the tarmac. From inside the plane, with the engine screaming, no windows, and no idea what was going to happen, the landing was exhilarating and terrifying. All I could do was hold my breath for the 20 to 30 seconds that we were falling. For the 20 years since, I haven't been able to board an aircraft without flashing back to that feeling of falling, of having no control. I'm going to play this short video. This is not a C-130, it's actually a smaller plane, but it is making a Sarajevo approach into the airport. So, I came in on a plane like that. I actually thought we had been shot. I thought, we're never going to make it. I'm just never going to make it in. I'm going to die on the way in. Because it drops in, and I had no idea it was going to do that. And so I get in, and I'm sitting in the back of the C-130, and one of the military people that's sitting up there comes back to me, and the plane lands, and it parks on the far end of the runway. I don't know why. I'm thinking that it doesn't want, if it gets hit by enemy fire, they don't want to blow up the terminal. So they're parked at the far end of the runway. The back of this thing opens. This guy walks up to me who has never said one word to me this entire flight in. He hands me one of these blue helmets, points to the hills and says, "The sniper fire has been coming from those hills to the left. He points off into the distance. You see that blue line? You run as fast as you can. So I put on this helmet, I put on my bulletproof vest, I come out of the back of that thing, and I'm running to the terminal as fast as I can. And I'm thinking three things. One, why do you have to park so dang far from the terminal? Two, they stick a blue hat on me. I'm like a duck in a shooting arcade. And three, I am going to learn to pack much lighter in the future. And actually now, wherever I travel in the world, I only take with me a carry-on. I never travel anywhere where I don't need to go by carry-on anymore. I have gone skiing for 2 weeks in Portillo and brought my ski boots with me with a carry-on. So I run over to the terminal, and there's not a soul there because the airport has been shut down. There's not one person there. I have no idea. I see the sign, maybe airlines, and I have no idea where to go. There's actually this hallway. So I walk down, I walk through it, and I pop up on the other side, and another military person comes up to me. They just don't talk over there. And all he says to me is, "Are you the doc?" I said, "Yes." He goes, "Okay, get in." And so I get into this tank, they close it up, and I sit in pitch black for another 2 or 3 hours while they take me into central Bosnia. I spent the next 6, 8 weeks over there providing medical care. It was an incredibly, I can't even come up with the right word. It's a difficult place to be. There are people, and their goal, from my perspective, was purely to kill as many civilians as they could. One group would try to kill civilians and displace them with their own citizens. Then another group would come in and kill more citizens and try to displace them with their own citizens. It wasn't a war against militaries. It was just a war where they were just trying to kill as many people as they possibly could. At least that was my perspective. There are only 8 million people in all of Bosnia. They had over 300,000 deaths. Now that is small compared to some wars, compared to most wars. But think of this. For every person that's killed, there are between 5 and 10 injuries. You're walking around in a country where it felt like 1/3 of the population was injured or disabled. It takes an incredible emotional toll. I worked in an emergency department that saw 600 to 800 people a day. If you talk to any emergency physician in the United States, they will tell you that's totally insane. We did that with between 2 and 4 doctors, and there's no electricity, there's no running water. In fact, there's almost no antibiotic. We set bones by looking at external morphology, that's all, because there's no electricity and there's no pain medicines, so we set them fast. Anything that wasn't gaping wasn't closed. Actually, the nurses would just discharge people. They would just say it wasn't serious enough. And it would be only open 14 hours a day because there's no electricity at night, and so there's no light. We actually put in place the first EMS system in central Bosnia, and we taught emergency medicine over there too. Over there, I learned incredibly valuable lessons about what it takes to succeed against incredible and immense challenge. What do we need to succeed in a zombie apocalypse or in an Asian financial crisis or in Bosnia? We need a strong culture. You need to have camaraderie, respect, resolve, and engagement. And you need to have team coordination. You need to have a shared mission, focused effort, sense of purpose, communication. It does not matter what product you're creating. If you don't have these two things, especially if you're a startup, when the dust settles, your company won't be here. You need to have culture and team. You hear this over and over again. Those are two of the absolute critical keys to success in your organization. And here's the thing. Culture is the job of your senior leadership. If you don't have a culture and team in your senior leadership, you're going to fail. And if you are a senior leader and you don't have it, you need to look at yourself as to why or what you need to do to create that culture. You hear all the time, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Actually, it totally does, and it is harder to create. Strategy you can come up with. It is like coming up with a great product. Everybody thinks they have a great product, but actually everybody's product is almost the same as everybody else's. What do you need to set yourself apart? You need to make sure you have the culture and the team for your enterprise to succeed. What does that mean? It means you need to share your why and that everyone has to be on the same page as you. Yesterday, I heard there was someone who said, who here is a tech company versus who here is with a patient care company? We need to recognize we're all here with a patient care company. That is the job of every individual in this room and every company that we're working with. We're all in the business of patient care. Pedal hop turn. Man, if there was a snowball right here on this cliff, that would create an avalanche. And that would be utter chaos. What would we do? By the way, does anyone know where this is? I don't know if who here skis? Great. This is El Gargantua in Portillo. It's a great place to ski if you ever get a chance. Who knows who this is? This is Ed. Oh, good. This is Ed Lorenz. Ed Lorenz was a mathematician and meteorologist at MIT. He's the founder of chaos theory. In the 1970s, he wrote a paper. Does the flap of a butterfly's wings in Brazil set off a tornado in Texas? And really in that paper, there were two assertions. One, long-range forecasts are impossible to predict. They're impossible to predict. And two, small events can have unexpected consequences. I'm sure many of you know about the Libby Zion case. This is an example of a tragic event that had enormous consequences across the entire United States. Libby Zion was a co-ed in New York City. In 1984, she went to an emergency department at a hospital. She was on an MAO inhibitor, and she was treated with Demerol, which you don't do together. As a result, she died. There was an investigation. They actually said, well, that was because the resident was working long hours and there was lack of supervision. Actually, both of those ended up not being true. The resident had just started his shift, even though they do work long hours, and his senior resident was actually in the hospital at the time. But as a result of the Libby Zion case, they started to limit resident work hours. I wish they had done that when I was in training. I trained that it was 110 hours a week. Now they're down to like 80. They increased the direct supervision, and they even put a cap on the number of admissions that physicians could have while they were working. What was one of the impacts of that? Well, 16 years later, the Bell Commission did this study, and their conclusions were the consequence of the regulatory changes in physician training is the loss of professionalism by physicians. Now viewing themselves as hourly workers, this may sever the bond between doctor and patient, a bond that has been the bedrock of our conception of a physician. Who could have ever predicted the unintended consequences of a single event? It's impossible. In the 2000s, who could have predicted that in 2010, we'd have the Affordable Care Act? In 2010, who could have predicted that Donald Trump would be elected president in 2016? Today, today, who can predict what Donald Trump is going to do with health care tomorrow? It's impossible. We can't predict the future. So, if an organization can't predict the future. How do we deal with uncertainty? How do we do that? If we can't predict what's going to happen next, what do we do? I've come up with something, and I'm going to use this gentleman to illustrate it. Now, I'm assuming many of you know who this is. Who knows who this is? Just raise your hand, because I can't hear you. Really, that's all. This is Bruce Lee. He's doing a two-finger push-up. Bruce Lee was a martial artist movie actor in the 1970s, but actually he did something else. He created his own martial art, and he was a philosopher. He graduated with a degree in philosophy from UW. And his martial art was an amalgam of multiple martial arts, and there were no forms. And he said, listen, you can't ever predict what's going to happen in a fight. You just need to be prepared. So instead of teaching you a series of moves, I am going to teach you some of the basic concepts of how to defend yourself. So it doesn't take long to learn, and then you just need to be in great physical shape so that you can protect yourself. His martial art was called Jeet Kune Do, so I call this organizational Jeet Kune Do. Here are some of the basic tenets of the martial art. The most efficient means of countering is the stop hit. When an opponent attacks you, you intercept his move with a thrust or hit of your own. So for my organization, CEP, when a hospital client says, before they even say, we need our physicians to see patients faster, we actually created a program, RME, that improved patient flow. And we went to our hospitals and said, we've created a program to improve patient flow here. It actually was one of our, what I call signature competencies that I'm going to talk about in a little bit. Understand your customers so that you can predict and respond. Here's another tenet of Jeet Kune Do. I hope to free my followers from clinging to styles, patterns, or molds. My movements are simple and direct. We wanted to address patient experience. We just created a callback program, simple. We wanted to address airway risk. We created an airway CME program. We wanted to address physician-nurse communication at our hospitals. We instituted board rounds across the enterprise. You want to be laser-focused, understand what the problem you are dealing with is, and come up with a very specific solution. Don't waste your effort and energies. And finally, does anyone know, this is a picture of Bruce Lee, and that is Ip Man, who is a Wing Chun martial artist from Hong Kong, and they're doing something called Qigong, which is not a martial art. It's not even practicing a martial art. It is simply a mechanism, an exercise, so that you learn to become more responsive to the person that you're interacting with. It is a simple mechanism of pushing and pulling so that you can sense what the person next to you is doing. Put water in a cup, it becomes the cup. Put water in a bottle, it becomes the bottle. Put it in a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Be water, my friend. When population health was an issue, CEP is population health. Readmissions is an issue for our hospitals. CEP is readmissions. That's what we're about. Bundled payments is an issue. CEP is bundled payments. So it's hard to go around saying your organization, you have an organizational Jeet Kune Do. So I've come up with another term. Aggressive adaptability. You need to be aggressively adaptable to your environment. I know what you're all thinking. Pedal hop turn. Actually, the slope's flatter here. We don't need to do a pedal hop turn. We can just link our turns now. So, aggressive adaptability. Adaptable to what? What are we adapting ourselves to? You have the culture, you have the team, you have the capabilities, you have the resources still. If you're not looking at the right thing, without that 1% inspiration, that 99% perspiration is just wasted effort. It is so critical that we identify exactly what it is that we need to do as an organization. I actually have a great job because I spend most of my time as gray time, and I just have to sit on the ski slopes and go, oh yeah, that's what we should do. And then we have these amazing teams actually that do the 99% perspiration, and they're amazing, and they actually do this amazing work. But it's actually the 1% doesn't take, oh well, you can ski and bike and do other things while you're doing that. So, what's our healthcare environment like? First, it's fragmented, it's difficult to access, and you have risk-averse clients. You have incredibly risk-averse clients. If you don't realize that you have risk-averse clients, anyone who's dealt with the industry should realize this. You have a group of physicians, for example, that have enormous sway in healthcare. Well, these are people that spent 14 years or more after high school studying so they could take on a job. Risk-averse clients. It's a risk-averse industry. And also, there's an incredibly long sales cycle. Why? Because everyone's overworked. You have to look at the bandwidth of the individuals. You have to look again, the risk-averse and how much evaluation time's needed. It's a low margin. You see health systems going out of business every other day. Why? Because the revenue in the healthcare industry is largely fixed, okay? And so you have an industry that is considering cost in everything. They're not looking at this as an investment. Look how much money I can make. They look at this as, how much is this going to cost me to put this type of program in place? What does that mean? That means your business development resources are critical. You can have the greatest product in the world, but you need to have business development resources in place. Two, you need to have, Milton mentioned this earlier, you need to have capital and organizational fortitude. You need to have both because you can't get discouraged by the sales cycle. It's not going to be 3 years. It may not even be 7. It is a long cycle in healthcare. And three, you need to consider your exit strategy at the outset. Because when the dust settles, again, there's not going to be 250 telehealth companies out there. There's not. So that doesn't mean you don't have a great product. You need to understand how you're going to position yourself so that your product lives, even if your entity doesn't, so that you can make sure that you get the value that you deserve for having created what you've done. Our future healthcare environment. This is nothing that anyone hasn't heard before. Technology is going to be incredibly important. There's going to be interoperability. There's going to be big data. There's going to be uniformity through care algorithms, and there's going to be provider clinical management through the electronic medical record. That is going to happen. Absolutely. The probability that is not going to happen is 0. It is going to happen. What does that mean? That means there will be commoditization of care and of technology, okay? Because things will become good enough, okay? What happens when things become good enough? You need to consider how you partner with your peers and providers in terms of your product, okay? It's not necessarily about eking something slightly different out of your product. Why was Dell so successful? They didn't have a better computer. They simply created internet ordering and home delivery. They didn't create a better product. They innovated in their relationship with their customers. What we need to look at is not just our product, but how we create a relationship with our customers. So, if you're a data company, your data without programmatic application has almost no impact, okay? And you need to consider how you're going to do that. Otherwise, you're like the 24-hour Nautilus that people walk by. You're not getting anyone in shape. You need to consider the type of data. I heard yesterday about data burden. Absolutely. And we need to consider the negative impact of the wrong data will have, on your ability to penetrate the market. Let me just give you one example. How often do you think a primary care physician needs to have a patient's weight who's at home pushed to him? Never. Okay, it is never. It's actually never necessary. It is not an emergent piece of information. Is weight important? Absolutely. Absolutely. If someone's weight is so important that you need to know the difference right then because they're going into worsening congestive heart failure, that person's short of breath, they're already in the emergency department, hopefully, or they should be calling and getting to the emergency department. It's not, if it's so critical that they are short of breath and then weight is becoming an issue, then it's not something that the primary care physician is going to deal with in his office. So, here's the thing. In hospitals, we admit patients all the time. What typically happens is patients wait. Someone comes in, we say they're ready to be admitted, and then they wait for a long period of time. Why? Because they're waiting for the admitting physician to come down and write orders and say, yes, the patient needs to be admitted. Do you know why you have to wait? Because 5 years ago, somebody admitted a patient that didn't need to be in the hospital. And so this is true. If there's any emergency physicians here, they will tell you this is absolutely true. What happens is, years later, a cardiologist will say, no, you can't admit that patient until I've seen him, because do you remember what happened to Joe Smith 5 years ago? There is over a 98% concordance between the admitting physicians and the emergency physicians, but we keep patients in the emergency department. Why? Because the negative impact is so much greater in terms of what the utility, the absolute value of the utility, than the benefit of having seen those patients sooner. It is like if you have $20,000, if you invest your money and you're the average American and you make $20,000, well, that's great. Man, if you lose $20,000 and you're the average American, you're all over your financial advisor. So, when you push unnecessary data to people that distracts them, what happens? They're going to ignore all your data. You are going to lose your credibility. So we need to look at how we partner with physicians and payers, how all the tech companies work together, how data companies, to make sure that we're getting the right data to the right person at the right time. Because if you get the wrong data, you're shooting yourself in the foot. Telecom that doesn't address delivery system processes. Okay, what's going on at 11 o'clock in the morning in a primary care physician's office? Well, he's got a nurse, he's got 2 medical assistants, he's got 2 clerks, he's got a tech working there. He's paying out a couple $100 an hour. He has a system in place. Do you think that he or she wants to take time to answer a telehealth call right then? When he has significant costs and he has a system in place, yes, maybe it improves patient care, but there is structure to the healthcare system. If we're a telehealth company, we need to look how we work with systems to improve the entire process so that the telehealth doesn't disrupt the day. Okay, otherwise, you're not gonna have traction again. So, we actually meet with telehealth companies all the time. In fact, we just met with one last week at our tech assessment, and they said, we're gonna partner with you. And I said, really? What does that mean to you? That was almost word for word. There's people in the audience who can say that was word for word. And they said, well, we're gonna sell you our product so that you can use it. And I said, well, that's not partnering with us. You're just selling us a product and you want us to go and use it. If you're partnering with us, we need to create a mechanism for looking at how we're going to take this product, readjust our practices, and create solutions that make sense for our patients, but for all the providers also. What else? There's commoditization of payers and providers, resulting in enormous consolidation, again, no secret, and there's significant convergence. Okay, what does that mean? That means large players will be integrated in local environments. I call this medicine without walls. I've written about it in also, but what is happening is we need to look at, if you're going to be working with providers or groups, you need to look at how you're working with entire systems in the future, because they are going to be completely integrated. We're moving to that type of environment at a very rapid pace. Not rapid enough for many, but we're moving in that direction. It is the top topic that we talk about in terms of strategy, is how do we integrate within our local environments? So what does that mean in terms of our value proposition and our innovations? Well, you have innovations that deal with product enhancement, but you also need to consider that you have to have innovation and a value proposition that deals with your client relationships. If you're just looking at your product and you have the best whatever widget, that's not going to be enough. You need to look at how you're going to innovate in working with your clients. And you also need to look at your own infrastructure and your own operations in terms of innovation, and to make you efficient and able to withstand the long sales cycle that exists in medicine. We all have core competencies. What we need to look at is what I call our signature competencies. Signature competencies are those unique enterprise value propositions which differentiate your organization and your brand. You need to and they don't need to be your product. It can be your relationship with payers. It can be within your own structure and how you operate. You can look at innovation and what your value proposition is in multiple different dimensions to understand what it is that you're going to sell as your competency. We sell our ability to lead. We actually don't sell that we provide better quality care. In fact, most people will agree that care across the entire United States is pretty uniform already. We talk about our ability to integrate with other groups of physicians and help manage process. So we don't necessarily talk about the product at all. Medicine without walls, create the culture, build the team, be aggressively adaptable, develop your signature competencies. Ski tough and enjoy this day. That's all I have. Thank you. I'm very hard of hearing, but I put my email address up there. Feel free to contact me. You can try to get me through my CEP address, which is prenticetom@cep.com, but there's a spam filter there, so I put up my AOL. As you can see, I've had an AOL for about forever. There's no 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 after it. You can just pltom@AOL. Thank you very much.